Have you ever looked at the headlines and just wondered, how is it possible for the wealthiest people on the planet to legally pay a lower tax rate than pretty much everyone else? It's not some crazy illegal scheme. It's a system, hiding in plain sight, that basically creates a completely different set of rules for the ultra-rich. So let's pull back the curtain and see exactly how it works.
Okay, just look at this number for a second. Between 2014 and 2018, Jeff Bezos' wealth shot up by an incredible $99 billion. And his effective federal tax rate on all that new wealth, a tiny 0.98%. To put that in perspective, if you earn a normal salary, you're probably paying a federal tax rate that's 10, maybe even 20 times higher than that.
And nope, this isn't some one-off thing. When you look at the IRS data for the 25 richest Americans, they paid a true tax rate of just 3.4% on their growing fortunes. You even have people like Elon Musk and George Soros who, in certain years, have paid zero. That's right, zero in federal income taxes. So how on earth is this possible?
Even Warren Buffett called this out years ago with his now famous quote. And what's really fascinating is that the strategy that allows for this is the very same one he uses. It's a playbook, a system, that's so effective it lets these massive fortunes just keep growing, almost completely untouched by taxes.
Well, the answer to this whole mystery actually has a name. It was coined by USC professor Edward McCaffrey, and it perfectly explains how this system is designed. It's called buy, borrow, die. And I promise you, once you understand these 3 simple steps, you will never look at wealth and taxes the same way again.
So at its core, this is all about preserving wealth by using perfectly legal parts of the tax code. We're not talking about finding some sketchy loophole here. We're talking about using the system exactly as it was designed, just in a way that most people could never dream of.
The whole strategy really comes down to these 3 deceptively simple steps. Each step on its own is pretty straightforward, but when you put them all together, they create this incredibly powerful engine for tax-free wealth. So let's break down each one. Okay, first up, buy. The rich don't focus on earning a salary, they focus on buying assets that go up in value over time. Stocks, real estate, art, you name it. And the absolute key here is a little something called unrealized gains. As long as you own that stock and don't sell it, the profit you've made on paper isn't real, so the government can't tax it. Your net worth can soar, but the IRS just has to sit on the sidelines and wait.
So if they never sell their assets, how do they pay for things, like yachts and private islands? Well, that brings us to the magic of step 2, borrow. Instead of selling stock and getting hit with a huge tax bill, billionaires just go to a bank and take out massive, low-interest loans using their portfolio as collateral. And here is the punchline. The IRS does not consider borrowed money to be income, so they get to access billions in cash completely tax-free.
But wait, what about those giant loans? They have to be paid back, right? This is where the final and, frankly, almost unbelievable step comes in. Die. When a wealthy person passes away, a tax rule called the step-up in basis kicks in. And what it does is, essentially, the IRS just forgives all those decades of untaxed gains. It hits a giant reset button. The heirs inherit the assets at their current value, meaning they can sell a little bit to pay off the loans without owing a single penny in capital gains tax. The cycle is complete, and the wealth passes on.
Now, I know what you're probably thinking. This has to be some kind of glitch in the system, right? A mistake. But the reality is, this is a feature, not a bug. It was deliberately designed this way, and it has been fiercely protected for more than 100 years. Let's see how. That step-up in basis rule, the linchpin of the die step, was created way back in 1921. Now, believe it or not, Congress actually managed to get rid of it once, back in 1976, but that repeal didn't even last 4 years. After a massive lobbying campaign, it was brought right back, and it's been politically untouchable ever since.
And who's protecting it? Well, a whole coalition of really powerful lobbying groups. I mean, it makes sense. The banks make billions from the loans. Investment firms want to keep that money in the market. Real estate and business groups all use the same exact strategy. Just in 2021, these groups spent over $200 million lobbying on tax issues, making sure these rules stay exactly as they are.
So, if this is all perfectly legal, why isn't everybody doing it? The answer, well, it kind of reveals that when it comes to taxes in America, there are really 2 different sets of rules, one for them and one for the rest of us.
So let's just ask the question directly. If this playbook is so brilliant, why can't you or me or any average person use it to build wealth and skip out on taxes? Well, it really just comes down to access and scale. And this chart just shows the difference perfectly. It's night and day.
A billionaire gets what's called a securities-backed loan at maybe 2% interest. You might be able to get a home equity loan at 8%. They can choose to only pay the interest on their loan, funded by their growing portfolio. You, on the other hand, have to pay back the principal and the interest out of your salary that's already been taxed. They're not even playing the same game.
And here's the real barrier to entry. This is the velvet rope. To even get in the door for these kinds of amazing loans, you need a massive portfolio to use as collateral. We're talking millions, sometimes tens of millions of dollars. Banks just don't offer these terms to regular people, which makes this entire playbook a tool reserved for the top 0.1%.
So, what's the actual impact of this exclusive system? What's the cost of having this sort of parallel tax universe? Well, the numbers are, frankly, staggering.
According to economists, the 400 wealthiest Americans are holding on to about $4.5 trillion in wealth, and the vast majority of that is in the form of those unrealized, untaxed gains we talked about, the very fuel that makes the buy, borrow, die strategy work.
Now, let's just look at one piece of this whole puzzle, that step-up in basis rule. It costs the U.S. government up to $60 billion in lost tax revenue every single year. And when you put that number next to the massive federal deficit, you really start to see the scale of the impact. That's money for infrastructure, healthcare, education that's just never collected.
And all of this brings us to one final, really big question. When you see a system that lets trillions in wealth grow tax-free, see how it's protected by armies of lobbyists, and see how access is basically restricted to only a tiny few, you really have to ask yourself, is our tax system broken by accident, or is it working precisely the way the people who designed it intended?